Hello, and welcome back to Round the Table. It's great to be with you again this week. I hope you've been keeping well since we were last on. Do always be posting in your comments. Always great to see you. Great to see some of your comments and your questions. Delighted to be joined today by Tim Dieppe and Steve Beegoo. Hi, Tim. Hi, Steve.
Afternoon.
Hey, good to be with you, Ben. Good to be with you.
Thank you both for joining this lunchtime. As I mentioned, do get your comments, your questions, your concerns, post them in the comments. We always love hearing from you as we engage with some of the issues that are going on this week in the culture. So, Steve, what's been happening with the Christian Legal Centre client, Hannah, this week?
Yeah, well, this is a really important week in court. I think it's worth saying as we kind of think about what's happening in court with a particular client called Hannah, it's important to say that adults, parents and teachers up and down the country are leading children to believe lies. Not just about Father Christmas or something. This is about lies about their gender. And Jesus said, if anyone causes these little ones of mine to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone tied around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Now, with this case, for Hannah, an employment tribunal in Nottingham is in the middle of hearing a case of this Christian teacher who was, well, and is really trying to protect little ones from lies. Now, this Christian teacher couldn't teach a child, didn't feel she could teach a child or actually other children to believe lies about their gender. And this teacher, this Christian teacher, Hannah, as she's known, had been there at this school for 5 years and no issues with her work or her teaching. And she raised safeguarding issues, safeguarding concerns about the primary school where she was teaching. As she was saying, they allegedly wanted the whole school community to, including Hannah, to be affirming an 8-year-old child in essentially a lie about their gender, and to be affirming them through what's known as social transition. I expect those that are viewing this or watching, they may have heard of that phrase, social transition. It's where a child's name can be changed, their pronouns that they start to use are changed by those adults around them, and then the toilets that they can use are then shifted and changed. They use the one of the other sex. This is all social transitioning. And Hannah was really concerned that they were going to do this affirming for this child in their school. Sounds like she was victimized, harassed, and then sacked, essentially, because she couldn't go along with this. We know this is happening in schools and with school staff up and down the country who just can't go along with lying to children. And they're trying to protect them from harm, really. Now, the Stonewall-inspired policies that were being used in this school in Nottinghamshire, we're told, it seemed to allow that any child in the school could just self-identify without any medical evidence. They could self-identify as a gender, and then they'd just be affirmed through the school with whatever gender they might choose. 8-year-olds. And, you know, some of these organizations like Stonewall, they say there could be 72 different genders, Ben. I was just going to quick look on Wikipedia under gender identity. The list is never ending. Even things like xenogender, where you identify as an animal. This school was basically saying these children, when they're confused, you should affirm them in their confusion. And Hannah was saying, I can't go along with this. And essentially she blew the whistle on this, Ben, and she asked lawyers to get involved because she was being reported as a safeguarding risk for even raising this herself. And eventually she was essentially needs to leave her job, and she's now working, I believe the report saying she's working in a sandwich bar now, unable to teach. So that's basically the situation of the story, and the Christian Legal Centre have been supporting Hannah in her claims against the school.
Thanks, Steve. No, it's a really horrifying case about Hannah, who's raised these concerns. But I guess something that's quite different in this case is the reality that I guess all Christians have concerns about social transitioning, we hope. All Christians are concerned about what's going on in our culture. And really, Hannah was actually stepping out, not just to say, I have concerns about this, but I need to do something to stop this. This child in our school is actually going to be harmed by going through this and doing something about it, which I think is something that many Christians are quite scared to do. It's hard enough to just express that we might have concerns. Are we actually going to do something about it? Tim, why do you think this case is important?
Well, I think this case is, as ever with some of our cases, it's all topsy-turvy, upside down, right? Here's this teacher who is concerned about safeguarding risk of this 8-year-old child socially transitioning in a primary school, and she ends up losing her job. And those teachers who want to affirm this 8-year-old child in socially transitioning, which is and it's obviously a safeguarding concern, that why is this happening? Are the ones who carry on with their jobs. It should be the other way around. Those people who are wanting to push and allow this child to socially transition, they're the ones that are a safeguarding risk to children in that primary school, and they should lose their jobs. And Hannah, that's not her real name, I think we maybe made that clear, should be the one who is keeping her job, who is the best teacher, who is the one that is right. So, that's clearly how it should be. Now, the government has subsequently brought out draft guidance that says that primary school children should not be allowed to change their gender or their pronouns and stuff. And it's basically sided with Hannah and said these other teachers would all be wrong. We've responded to that consultation, and we encourage supporters to respond to that consultation. Well, we'll see what happens with the final guidance. But that's the line the government is now taking on this. And yet Hannah is still there, having lost her job, for saying, well, are we sure that this is really the right thing for this pupil? She didn't even say, we definitely shouldn't do it. She said, isn't there a safeguarding concern about this? And surely, she's kind of obviously, bringing a case against the school for discrimination and whistleblowing and all of these kind of things, based on her Christian faith. And she's been giving evidence in court this week, and we will see how that goes.
Yeah.
But it is an extraordinary case that she's the one who gets picked on and victimized, when she's the one who's obviously doing the right thing here.
And it's not just the school; it's the county council who have a Stonewall champion in their county council, advising them, providing guidance to the school that the school then soaks up with its own potentially activists within the school, and the county council have been embedded in the county council's thinking about what should or shouldn't be done with the children. And when you look at these guidance that the county councils are now providing to schools up and down the country, and have been for several years now, you can see it doesn't contain any kind of question about whether this might be a harmful thing to do for a child, that's any form of social transitioning, that it might take them in a direction that would lead to further confusion and then surgery. There's none of those potential harms or dangers highlighted. It's just affirm. And as Tim rightly highlights, the new draft guidance actually goes completely opposite to that. It says watchful waiting is basically what it says. You don't just affirm these things in 8-year-old children. You wait and you see what happens, because in the vast majority of cases, these things work themselves out, and no affirmation is required. And in fact, that kind of affirmation is going to harm them and push them in that kind of direction. And this is coming from local government as much as it is from the authority within the school.
Thanks, Steve. Good to see some of the comments coming in. Friend of Christian Concern, Hi Badir, he writes, we should have the freedom to question and challenge any radical ideology. The Allen View writes, well done, Hannah. It's the school leaders who wants to teach this nonsense to children who need sacking, as you say, Tim.
Yeah.
Great to see regular viewer Christopher McCormick write and ask a question. Tim, I'll put this to you. How do you know it's a lie, out of interest?
Well, it's a bit like saying, how do I know 2 + 2 is 4 and not 5? There are things that we know are definitely true. And one of them is that all people have got chromosomal indicators of their gender or their sex, and therefore and you can't change that. You can't change every cell in your body. You just can't do it. And so this idea that we have all these different gender identities and that people should therefore be encouraged to change their gender, it's artificial. It's not going to work. It's not going to actually change them. The suicide rates go up after transition, worse than they are before transition. It's harming people's body for a problem in the mind, and it's not the best way to help them. And that is why we say very clearly it's a lie to tell children you can change your gender.
And it's a scientific lie. I mean, a lot of the wrestling around this is around what is biological sex. Well, biological sex is biologically, scientifically determined. But there's also, of course, the scriptures. And in this case of Hannah, she's saying her Christian conscience, she couldn't go against this. And Christian worldview belief, right at the very start of the scriptures, it says God created us male and female. So it's not just science. This is actually something which is written into the scriptures about how God has created us as male and female in his image. And that's another really important aspect. We don't create ourselves in our own idea of what our image should be. God has created us in his image as either male or female. And any part of the fall that we're experiencing does not therefore change that absolute truth that God has created us male and female and that we have those identities. And in fact, what is being created is almost like a pseudo soul. What's being told to children and young people and society in general is there's this invisible aspect to who you are, which is who you really are. And it's like a soul that's being created in a different kind of format. And again, the Lord has given us
born in the wrong body.
Yes, exactly right. Yes,
is a lie. You're born in the right body.
Yes, yeah, and that's what we teach children.
It's actually quite liberating. A culture that it's disastrous to think I need to work out who I am by looking inside. And actually it's liberating to be like, God tells me who I am because he's my creator. If we ignore what the creator did, if the clay says to the potter, what are you making? It's an absurdity. And actually it's liberating for us to be able to tell people, no, you are a man or a woman made in the image of God. The creation is good. It's fallen because of the fall. But actually God welcomes us as we are, doesn't allow us to stay as we are, but he is the one at work in us, making us more like Jesus, and so that we can accept our bodies. I don't think anyone's ever denying that gender dysphoria is a real thing, and it's a deep brokenness, but we don't respond to that by creating a deeper lie. When the mind is disconnected from the body, I guess in one sense there's an incongruence about how you view yourself. We don't say to someone struggling with anorexia, yeah, maybe you are overweight, why don't you lose more weight? We say, no, that's not who you are. That's what we need to be doing. And
we especially don't say that to children.
Yes.
And this is the whole thing. These are young minds growing and learning about who they are from the adults around them. They don't just know who they are. Actually, God has provided people to be responsible, to steward after them, and the parents and the teachers. If they're doing the opposite, they're leading them away from God. They're leading them into sin, potentially, in the way that they're leading them towards harming their bodies. And the Lord speaks very strongly about that. So this is a really serious issue. And as somebody has said, we applaud Hannah for her bravery. You're right, Ben. She has been incredibly courageous in speaking up, doing something about it.
Great to see some of these encouraging comments. Jacqueline, I will never keep quiet if pushed into a corner, even family members trying to shut me down, but I remind my grandchildren about being male and female, using bunny rabbits and nature in general. Any opportunity I get, I go for it. Standing with you, dear Hannah. Nicole, just joining now. I did the consultation. Great. Thank you, Nicole. It seems there are no safety mechanisms in place whatsoever. The children don't even understand. Maybe just quickly, Steve, what should we do if our children's school are teaching this ideology?
Complain. Make a fuss. Write a formal complaint to if the head teacher is in charge of what curriculum is being put into schools, into their school. They are the arbiter of all of that. And if they're allowing this stuff into their school, then you complain to the chair of governors. You say the head teacher is allowing these things in. So you make a complaint about the head teacher to the chair of governors. Now, I've gone straight for the kind of nuclear button there. If you can liaise with staff in school and talk, some of them are just ignorant and they need to be educated, would you believe? around this kind of area. But in a lot of places, you find there's activism around all of this. And if you activate the formal complaints process of a school, and their complaints procedures and policy is online, you just go on their website, find the policy section, activate that, then they have to respond to you. They can't just brush you aside. They have to respond to you within specific time scales, in specific sorts of ways, and do particular sorts of investigation within the school and research about what is going on and what has happened and what curriculum is being used. So your complaint can cause a suitable stir that means everything is being reflected on and reviewed. And at the moment, with the draft guidance for the gender questioning children stuff there, and with the letters that Gillian Keegan, the Secretary of State, has sent to schools saying you must be transparent about what you're teaching your kids, it's a really good moment to really push back to the schools and say, hang on a minute, what is it that you're teaching my children? I want to know about it, and I'm upset if you're going to teach them that gender identity is actually a thing and kids can be trans, because it's all a lot of nonsense.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Really helpful. And yeah, of course, there's lots of resources on our website as well. So do check those out. In a similar theme about speaking up about children, it's been reported that a Christian artist, Victoria Culf, client of the Christian Legal Centre, is taking legal action after a local council banned her from her own exhibition, saying she has to give 24 hours notice. And she was reported to the police for saying, just whilst making a cup of tea, that it is harmful for children to try and change their sex. She was having an informal conversation with someone from Watford Council who was saying, proactively initiating this conversation. So Victoria, not the one initiating this conversation, but a member of Watford Council, said about how their child is social transitioning, how this is good, getting advice from the Tavistock Clinic. Victoria Culf says gently in this conversation over a cup of tea that her Christian convictions is that children shouldn't be allowed to socially transition. As a result of that, she was reported as a possible hate crime incident. She was removed. Her artwork was actually damaged as part of this exhibition, and she was banned from coming to the exhibition. She had to give 24 hours notice because she might have been a kind of health and safety risk to this other Watford Borough Council member who was traumatized because of this one cup of tea conversation. So Victoria and the exhibition, her artwork at the exhibition was then removed from the exhibition. So she's now taking this to court. She's challenging the Watford Borough Council for what they've done. This exhibition that was in the museum. I think this is just the next example of a kind of cancel culture, which is removing those with gender critical views, those who are questioning this transgender ideology. We heard of the case of Hannah just now in the school, but also not just in education, but in the workplace and in the arts as well. Victoria Culf having her artwork removed from the exhibition and actually damaged as part because she had expressed these views, and being told only you have to give 24 hours notice before you're allowed in is a really shocking example of this council culture. And the fact that what happened was they reported her to the police. It was being marked as a hate crime incident, and that only then got exposed. And during a data request for the information that they had on her, basically revealed, they said they didn't have any information about her. The whole case has been inconsistent, discriminatory, and excluding Victoria Culf just because over a cup of tea she expressed her Christian gender critical views. Tim, what do you think about this case?
Yes, I mean, I think it's, all she did, like you said, Ben, is sort of, have a discussion in private, and, openly and gently just saying, well, personally, I wouldn't support that. She even said something like, you know what's best for your family, or you do what's best for you, think's best for your family, kind of thing, but personally, I wouldn't support that. She said she thinks Tavistock Clinic should be closed down, which it is being closed down next week, end of the month. It's being closed down by the government. Yeah. She said that children should not be given puberty blockers. And guess what? The NHS has come out now and said we're not going to do that anymore as well. So the tide in society is moving her way. And yet, this extreme reaction of, gosh, you said something so offensive, we're going to have to bar you from your own exhibition, 24 hours notice, and so on. And clearly discrimination against her for her views, because she said what a lot of people think, particularly with children, that they shouldn't be allowed to transition. Most people in the country do not think children should be allowed to transition, and that is all she said, and yet she gets this discrimination. I hope she wins her case here, and I think there's a lot of sympathy for her in the media for what she's done, and free speech kind of provisions as well and stuff, and we really need to protect the rights of Christians and others to say what they think on this kind of issue.
Yeah, and well, on the comments about coming across well in the media, Jacqueline writing, she was terrific on GB News, a common sense, no nonsense lady who loves children in the very real way. Shame some churches are too afraid to speak up. It was interesting as part of this, it's come out that because the Times approached the police to ask about the status of the hate crime report, and were told that a non-crime hate incident had been recorded against Mrs. Culf's name without her knowledge. And I guess in light of, because Harry Miller, a friend of Christian Concern, has been doing a lot of work on that, Tim, why is that in particular quite shocking?
Well, because Harry Miller had a non-crime hate incident recorded against him for expressing gender-critical views, actually, and he brought a case against the police for that, and the police lost. And it was a very strong ruling saying we can't have a Stasi-like state like this that records non-crime hate incidents in this kind of way that might prevent you getting a job without you even knowing about it, and all this kind of thing. So the police aren't supposed to record these things. And I gather that when the police were told, I suppose you're not really supposed to do that after Harry Miller, they backed down and said, oh no, it didn't really meet the threshold. Who knows what they really did there? I think probably she should do a subject access request to the police and say, what do you have on me? And get hold of what's actually happened here. And I expect our lawyers are probably advising us to do exactly that. But the police, this is nothing to do with the police. It's a conversation over coffee or tea in the workplace where nothing offensive was said, nothing hateful or anything like that was said. There's no threats. There's no violence. There's no crime committed. The police should have nothing to do with it. And that's what we need to get to. And it's crazy that the police were involved at all in this whole incident.
Steve, what advice can we be giving to Christians in trying to navigate these kinds of conversations? Is it just a reality that just speaking the truth and graciously may now just end up with us being investigated by the police, losing our art exhibitions?
Yeah. Well, I think it's clear that it's a spiritual warfare. It's this parent who had obviously been involved in allowing or heading towards the transitioning of their child. They'd been duped themselves, and they'd headed down a particular direction with their child. And when addressed about that by somebody saying, "This is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this," something is stirred up in them, and it's not just about a debate about what is right and what is wrong. It's something visceral and spiritual that is going on that causes the level of anger and the level of attack that then starts to be poured out as a result of it. And the Bible says the weapons that we fight with are not the weapons of this world, but they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. And there's weapons that we have through prayer, through the courage that comes when we're filled with the Holy Spirit to speak the truth. These are powerful things that do push back against the enemy's kingdom. And the courage and the truth combined with that prayer and that commitment to following God, following the truth of his kingdom, following Jesus Christ in these areas will push back the kingdom of darkness. But it's it requires perseverance, it requires prayer, and it requires the church around you, the Christians around you, to pray with you when you find yourself. And many people who are watching this and recording on this, you may find yourself in these kind of circumstances as you stand for the Lord Jesus Christ in the 21st century here in the UK. And so that's my advice for people at the moment, Ben.
Great, thank you, Steve. Well, let's continue praying for Victoria Culf and the lawyers as they take up that case against Watford Borough Council on the grounds of breach of contract, discrimination, harassment, misfeasance in public office, negligence, intimidation, defamation, conspiracy, and malicious falsehood. Let's pray for justice there as we stand prayerfully, knowing that this, we wage not against flesh and blood. Thank you, Steve.
And pray for us that we win these cases, because case law makes a difference.
Yes. We, it's very strategic and important and sets a precedent. So absolutely. And just justice for those who are being oppressed, justice for those who there is injustice. We do need to just stand with those people. So yes, absolutely. So pray for victory, pray for justice, and pray for the Lord's name to be glorified. Tim, there was a Westminster Hall debate on Monday. Tell us about that.
Yes, thanks, Ben. Well, there was a parliamentary petition to remove LGBT content from the relationships curriculum. And that petition received some 250, very nearly 250,000 signatures. And you need over 100,000 signatures and to force the government to host a debate about this. There was also a rival response petition that said, keep LGBT content in education. That got just over 100,000 signatures, not as many, but enough to qualify for a debate. And so a debate was held to debate these two petitions on Monday just gone about whether LGBT content should be removed from the RSHE curriculum. Now, it's interesting to note that the government did commission an independent expert panel on age appropriateness within relationship, sex and health education last year that produced a report, and the government refused to publish it. And that's been quite controversial. 50 Conservative MPs wrote to the Prime Minister urging him to launch this inquiry, and it has not been seen. We don't know the results of it, but evidence was produced by a number of people, including Miriam Cates MP, of the awful content of some of this education. Evidence of things like promotion of anal sex, group sex, choking, explicit imagery, surrogacy, kink, BDSM, masturbation lessons, and saying things like, contrary to historical Western beliefs, gender is not binary. So there's lots of people who are concerned about this, and of course we've had several of our cases, including of course Hannah, which we've just been discussing today, that relate to this whole issue. Calvin and Nicola Watts subjected to 8-year-old children being taught they might have been born in the wrong body. Gladys Ledger sacked for refusing to teach extreme LGBT ideology, which introduced children to gender identities like pansexual, asexual, intersex, transgender, and used a Stonewall film to promote LGBT ideology, including suggesting that David and Jonathan from the Bible and Ruth and Naomi were all in homosexual relationships. Izzy Montague her child forced to participate in a pride parade. School pupil, 10-year-old pupil as she was then, Casey, saying that LGBT is in every lesson, including maths and so on. And they had to watch a video of an 11-year-old undergoing surgery in an attempt to transition. Bernard Randall, sacked for saying you should be free to disagree with LGBT ideology. Christy Higgs, sacked for sharing on Facebook concerns about the content of this material. So there's so much evidence of this, and of people being taught. Policy Exchange as well brought our report saying lots of evidence, things like people being told it's offensive to refer to people as biological male and female. And 25% of secondary schools teach some people or children are born in the wrong body, and so on. And so, this is a live issue. This is why a petition attracted 250,000 signatures and a rival petition just 100,000. And it was debated on Monday. Sadly, very nearly every MP who spoke, the vast majority of MPs who spoke, were in favour of LGBT content in the curriculum. and argued for it and said we need to be a tolerant, inclusive society, used all this kind of language, and even pointing out something like opposing this might be against British values. There was Nick Fletcher, who spoke very well about how we shouldn't be promoting transgenderism to young children, and that was very good. And I think Angela Rayner as well asked a question about, don't you think we should protect the innocence of children, particularly at primary school? So there were some MPs, only 2 or 3 really, who spoke up against LGBT in education, but 1 or 2 who most of them were in favour of it, which shows, I think, that the MPs are out of touch with what parents are thinking up and down the country, because there is widespread concern about this. Certainly promoting LGBT ideology in primary schools in particular goes against the values of many, many parents. You've had masses of protests at Muslim schools, Jews as well object to this, Christians as well, and others of no faith as well object to it. And it's contrary to Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which says parents have a right to ensure their religious and philosophical beliefs are respected in their children's education. And the government does not define what is age appropriate, leaves it up to the school. No. Schools are frequently teaching things that many people regard as completely age inappropriate. A lot of parents are concerned about their children being sexualized before they're mature enough to really think about this kind of thing, introduced to sexual concepts and ideas that they don't need to be and aren't helpful for them to be introduced to. In any other context, that would be seen as a safeguarding risk. Somehow in schools, it's not at the moment. And being taught you're in the wrong body, as we just discussed, is a lie. It's unscientific. It should never be taught as fact in any school ever. Education Act 1996 forbids partisan teaching ideology in schools, and yet they're teaching LGBT ideology uncritically. And so we sent a briefing out to all MPs actually about this, which you can read on our website. And but sadly the debate, there wasn't a vote or anything, but the debate was not supported in terms of most MPs did not support removing LGBT content from education. So there's a big battle to be done to get that back. Wow. But anyway, there we are. It's there is the petitions show widespread concern about this, and lots of people are concerned. And of course, I'm sure Steve could say more. This is partly why many parents are homeschooling or even setting up alternative schools.
Yeah, Steve, how can parents be responding to this?
Schools are required to involve the parents in processing what the RSE policy, relationship and sex education policy, is in their schools. So when you see in the newsletter, "Oh, would you like to be involved?" you say, "Yes, I would like to be involved." Also, you can become a governor of your school, and then you'll be aware of the stuff that's coming in, and you can raise the voice of parents as being a governor in school. That's really important. You need to be really vigilant about what your children are telling you. I mean, talk to your children. Make sure you're spending time talking to your children about what they're learning about. Ask them about it. Say, what have you been being taught about marriage or sex or relationships in school? Find out from them. I think if you haven't done that, you may be shocked to discover some of the things that they're learning in their local school. And require the school to be transparent about its actual curriculum. Remind them of the letter that was sent to them by the Department for Education from Gillian Keegan herself that says they must be transparent with you about the curriculum. And then you can see it, and then you can sniff it all out, and you can discover what is being taught to your children, and you can therefore be able to make concerns, complaints clearly to the school on the basis of your knowledge about what they're teaching. And just to say this, it's not required that primary schools in relationships education teach about any LGBT stuff. It's not required. It's quite clear in the government guidance that you don't have to. If a head teacher decides not to, they don't have to. And there's general encouragement to do so. And of course, the schools were absolutely flooded by the LGBT organisations with free resources of all sorts when relationship and sex education came in a couple of years ago. So it's not actually something that happened in primary schools particularly. So I would encourage parents to be bold, to step out. And as you say, Ben, many people have decided that they want to start their own schools, or they're going to home educate. And we as Christian Concern, we are working alongside many groups up and down the country that have made bold decisions to make sure that Jesus Christ is right at the heart of every aspect of education, because he's not in the typical state school that you send them to. What's worshipped is worship of self, worship of man. We're going to be the best child we can be. We're going to achievement for achievement's sake, essentially. No honouring of Christ at the centre of things. And parents are saying, hang on a minute, shouldn't we be discipling our children with Jesus Christ right at the centre of all aspects of education, where the Bible is being truly taught in art, in history, and in geography, and how we handle things with parents? And if you're interested in finding out about that, contact us at Christian Concern. We're supporting many parents, many groups, many churches up and down the country who are taking a really bold stand in starting new Christian initiatives in this area.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Great to see some of these comments coming in. Hybrid, yes, I talked to my girls, 8 and 11. They seem to understand sex change is artificial and ungodly. Addict post, we need to be watchful what is being taught to our kids in schools. Jacqueline, thank you for all you do at Christian Concern. Well, thank you for your support, Jacqueline. Steve, I'll come to you with this. Christopher, again, why should gay people be excluded from seeing themselves represented in sex ed? So I guess maybe we can take this as relationships ed, or because we've mainly been talking about primary schools, but can you, how would you respond to Christopher there?
So why should gay people be excluded from seeing themselves represented in education? So again, we've been particularly talking about primary schools when we're talking about things here. The idea of primary education is not to make sure that every minority group is represented. The idea of education is to be able to teach children so they can flourish in society. And there are all sorts of subjects, all sorts of minority groups that we don't focus on or bring up or raise to our children, but certain aspects of certain groups, certain protected characteristics are being gold plated and being highlighted in a way to appropriate ways over and over and over again. This is what we are really concerned about. And it's not that there is an exclusion of those people that is what is being aimed at, but it's including what is right for a 7-year-old child, 8-year-old child to be taught about. What we see is that the resources that are given to, say, primary school to teach about these kinds of things, it has to have very basic explanations in their glossaries and the definitions of terms. So, for example, lesbian children, 7-year-old girls here, we're going to teach you what a lesbian is. And a lesbian is girls who love each other. So you explain those things. This is what's being encouraged to be explained to our young children. And of course, if you're a girl who's 7, 8 years old, you prefer to play with your same-sex friends. That's just kind of natural stage of life. This inappropriate way of presenting these issues to children, trying to do it in the simplest possible way, actually leads to confusion. And when I was a head teacher, I would have Christian parents coming to me saying, my kids are being duped by the way in which they're being taught, being confused to believing that they're gay, to believing that they are lesbians because of what they prefer to do and how they prefer to play at their age. So it's about the age appropriateness that is the really important thing that teachers should be considering, not am I representing, am I going to please every minority group that feels that they should be represented in the curriculum. Does that make sense, Ben? Have I answered that?
Yeah, no, that's
well.
Super
Good.
helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Tim, there's still a kind of inconsistency. So I guess we want to, Tim or Steve, really. So there is this sense of we want parents to engage with schools, to see the resources that are going on. And yet there seems to be this secrecy, which MPs seem to be oblivious towards, from these LGBT education organizations about the accessibility of the resources.
I think, as Steve said, that schools are obligated from the government to share their lesson plans on these issues with parents should they request it. So do request it, because actually, shining light is the best disinfectant. As somebody said, exposing it out into the sunlight is going to then make people realize what's really happening. There is still a problem, though, that some schools are refusing, and that was mentioned in the debate in Parliament on Monday, that some schools are still refusing, in spite of the government having written to all schools saying you must share the content of these lessons with parents. And if that's the case with you, please get in touch with us, because we would love to help you with that. But there has been some secretiveness about this, which is why the government wrote to schools saying you must be able to share this stuff. And the government's right to do that, because if people are able to see what's being taught, they're going to be much more careful what they say, and they recognise that this is not what parents want. That's why they're being secretive about it. They know that parents don't want it, and parents don't like it, and there's a lot of opposition to it, and so they're hiding it and doing it secretively behind parents' backs, and that's what's kind of secretive and sinister, really, about this whole agenda.
Yeah, and just to say, I mean, the letter itself said, and I'll quote it. Today, and she put this letter out, Gillian Keegan, to in the public. Today, I'm writing to schools and parents to debunk the copyright myth that parents cannot see what their children are being taught. Parents must be empowered to ask, and schools should have the confidence to share. So there is no reason, and if ever somebody is being told, we can't show you this for copyright marketing reasons, then you can ignore that, because Gillian Keegan's made it as clear as day.
No, great. I guess I have in mind, sorry, I just do want to clarify it. So wasn't it last year there was the case of the mum who took either the school or the LGBT trust to court? So I know this may not be recent in our minds, but lost the case because of those commercial interests. It might be shared when it's meant to be, it's paid for material, whatever.
She did. It wasn't one of our cases,
No.
Ben, just to make that clear, but she did lose that case. I think she's going to appeal it. And I think it illustrates that they are still trying to hide. Some schools and some organizations are still trying to hide what they're teaching. And I'd be very concerned if your school is refusing to show you what they're teaching. If they're hiding it from you, then what have they got to hide? Why are they trying to hide it? This excuse of copyright is an excuse. They may be able to hide behind it legally for a little bit longer, but they shouldn't be able to hide behind it at all.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tim. Thank you, Steve. And thank you all for tuning in to this week's Round the Table. It's been a great discussion, and it's been great to engage with your comments and your questions, as always. And it's been a great conversation. Looking forward to seeing you again. Next week we're not on.
No, there won't be one next week.
Have a wonderful, blessed, Holy Week. And we'll see you after Easter. Have a blessed time celebrating the Lord's death, burial, and resurrection. See you next time on Round the Table.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks.